And welcome to an honest conversation about COVID. My name's Ben and I'm the Chief Exec at the University of York Students' Union, that's YUSU. And it's my job to amplify the voices of students and elected officers and elected leaders to try and make sure that their voices are heard by key decision makers. And that's really the purpose of today's webinar. That as students try to navigate the radical changes of the environment that's brought around by a global pandemic, that we really want to make sure that we can engage with, understand, and try and address your concerns, your questions, and your anxiety. We've of course seen York move up to Tier 2 today, and I know that you are wondering what that might mean for you, for the university, for the union, and the broader city. We're going to hear today from the University Vice-Chancellor, Charlie, and from 3 of your elected student sabbatical officers, Patrick, the YUSU President, Maddi, the York Sport President, and Jane, the York Graduate Students Association Academic Officer. And they're going to briefly set the scene for you before we spend the majority of the meeting really trying to listen to your questions that you're going to be able to ask using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we're going to try and really respond to the most popular ones of those that you like the most. I'm going to start by handing over to Charlie to try and set the scene for us.
Thanks very much, Ben, and good to have so many students on the call this evening. I want to say just a few things to help set the scene, and the first of those is to say thank you. Things are by necessity very different at the university this autumn. There is lots to adapt to, and thank you for adapting so well and for following all the guidelines that we have to follow. I think students have been unfairly treated in recent media coverage, not in and around York, but more generally. But I think that how students have responded in York just shows how unfair that media coverage has been. Let me say a little bit about how we have prepared and responded to work as a university during this pandemic. And that's broadly by offering a blended provision. So a mix of in-person activity and online activity. First and foremost, that's the case in our teaching. We have some carefully designed online elements to our courses and some face-to-face in-person teaching in carefully managed teaching settings. And you'll have seen how we're doing that with all the hygiene measures. You can't walk a few meters without seeing hand sanitizers, with all the spacing measures, with all the ventilation, the face coverings policy, and so on, all designed to keep our teaching settings safe. You'll also have noticed the way we've adapted our social provision. I'm delighted that YUSU has been able to establish its special venue, the Forest, and adapt its other venues to offer face-to-face socializing possibilities in a very controlled and safe environment, probably the safest in the city, while also running a whole range of sports and other activities through the various clubs and societies. And alongside that, an awful lot of activity provided by YUSU and GSA online to supplement what we can do face-to-face and to replace those things we can't do face-to-face. And then, of course, we have a full range of other services available at the university in that blended model around careers, around skills, mental health and wellbeing resources, the library, all adapted to these circumstances. Ben mentioned in his introduction that we we've seen a new national classification for local areas categorized according to COVID risk. We started out at the lowest level when that was introduced last week. We've now moved up to the middle tier, which is confusingly called high. and that changes the restrictions that we face. And the biggest change is that there can be no household mixing indoors. Households can still mix outdoors, subject to the rule of 6. But the key change is an end to indoor mixing between households, and that's an unwelcome change, but one we're going to have to get used to. As you will have seen, and we publish this on the website every day, we have had a significant number of COVID cases at the university. We have around about 300 active positive cases at the moment, almost all of them students. We discuss each and every case with the City Council's public health team, and all of the evidence that we've got from that points to transmission happening within and between households. The vast majority of cases fall very straightforwardly into that category. We have no evidence of transmission in teaching settings, nor of transmission in the forest where YUSU is putting on that social facility. Some of you may well have had to find out about the local testing capabilities. We are despite all the difficult publicity around testing a couple of weeks ago, we are getting access to tests quickly, whether as home test kits or in the walk-in site, which is available on the edge of Cantworth in the campus in Wentworth Way. And we understand that the results are coming back quickly. Alongside that, we do within the university an initial tracing exercise before the national tracing capability kicks in, so that we can quickly respond with advice to households to self-isolate and in relation to other contacts that may have happened in the university setting. One consequence of those cases is, of course, that other students are in self-isolation. We have large numbers. It's about 2,500 of our students at the moment, both on campus and off. And we've seen some difficult media stories about this. Our view is that self-isolation is an act of collective responsibility. It's a selfless act. You self-isolate in order to protect others. And that's an act which should be applauded and supported. It's no fun, but it is necessary. And our role is to make sure that that support is available in various ways, making sure that students on and off campus have access to essential provisions, but also taking measures to ensure the well-being of students in self-isolation through regular contact, through access to online services for mental health well-being, but also for online recreational activities. And again, the work of our students' unions in putting on online activities has been brilliant, but also essential. Now, I imagine that some of you on this call are currently in self-isolation. I hope you are speeding towards the end of your period. I'd just like to say thanks to you for acting in that way. It is a crucial mechanism to limit transmission, and we all appreciate it. Ben, I'm going to stop there and make sure we leave enough time for questions.
Thank you ever so much, Charlie. I'm going to hand straight over to Patrick, and Patrick, if you can make some short remarks and then hand straight on to Maddi, who will hand straight on to Jane. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Ben. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick O'Donnell, and I'm president of YUSU. So we've been working really closely with the university and partners across the city over the last few weeks and months to make sure that we can have a really safe return to campus. So we've been advising the university and working with them really closely, to make sure our teaching spaces and all our other learning spaces and places like the library are ready for all of you to come back, as we all have done, or many of us have done over the last few weeks. And as Charlie's referenced, we've challenged ourselves to do what we can to, facilitate social time, because we're really aware that, people will get down. We have to provide, opportunities to socialise, in our venues, and we're very lucky to have a green campus. So, our challenge to ourselves is, why don't we make use of that? So we have expanded all of our venues. They can be booked out for students and student groups, which I think is fantastic. And yes, today we have seen the tier 2 restrictions, which are coming this weekend. But we've done the planning behind the scenes, over the summer, to plan for all eventualities. So to reassure everybody, we are ready for anything essentially that is on the horizon. And what's great to see is, talking with students, a vast majority of student groups, of students themselves living on and off campus, are following the rules and are doing their best. And some of you may have seen the sort of fairly lazy headlines in some of the tabloid press, and unfortunately for some figures in government who seem to be putting the blame on students. But frankly, that is not true, and that's certainly not the picture at York. Students are on the front line. Many of us have been working in the NHS, in supermarkets, in the hospitality sector to frankly keep this country going over the last few months. So I also want to extend Charlie's thanks to all of our students and everyone in our community and staff as well, for doing the right thing and isolating when required, not only to keep ourselves safe, but also keep our neighbours and the rest of the community in York safe. So I'm going to hand over to Maddi in just a second, who's going to talk about our sports and activities and how we're going to continue to run them over the next few months. But I just want to conclude by saying thanks everyone for your engagement on this. And by all means, we are your YUSU officers, myself and Maddi and the rest of the team. We're here to represent you. So please do get in touch. Whether you have an issue with your accommodation, with your learning, your teaching, anything else, please get in touch. And whether we need to nag the university or tackle more broadly with the council or the government, we're absolutely here to help you. So please get in touch. Maddi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maddi. I'm the York Sport Union president, and I'm here this evening to sort of reassure you on the sports and socks side, so the activities front. We've been working really closely with the university over the last 6 months, namely York Sport and Estates, also the colleges, to produce a return to activity staging system for both sports and societies, informed completely by the DCMS and Sport England advice and guidance. And this has gone out to all university and college club committees, as I'm sure you're aware. We've prepared this system to be flexible, which will allow us to move up and down the stages depending on the local and national situation, because we wanted our student leaders and our sports members to be informed of what was happening should the worst case scenario happen. Essentially, we want to ensure that students can undertake safe and COVID secure physical and social activity for the benefit of your physical and mental well-being over the next few months. And I, again, would like to extend my thanks to the vast majority of committees who have been nothing but a delight in implementing this system and welcoming new members, making sure new students feel safe on campus. And again, beyond this webinar, if you have any questions to raise about sports or activities in general, please get in touch. You should all have my email or my Facebook, whatever. So just send me a message. I think I'm passing on to Jane now.
Yes, thank you for that, Maddi. Hello, everyone. I'm Jane Baston. I'm the Vice President Academic at the University of York's Graduate Students Association. So we represent postgrads, just in case you haven't heard of us. So at the GSA, much like at YUSU, we've been working very hard to ensure that our postgraduate students are still able to build the community that we know that you all value, and that you're able to access your studies as well. So we have a number of established student groups that we help lead, and we also have 12 student-led networks that we hope will be running events throughout the rest of the term and also across December and January, because we're aware that postgraduate lives don't necessarily conform to the usual termly cycle of universities. We're also working alongside York Sport to make sure that we can provide you all with the normal informal sports sessions that we provide. And in addition to that as well, we also have our advice service, which are still offering appointments. So if you do need any form of support, please do get in touch with them. As ever, the Sabbatical Officer team is working very closely with the university and with YUSU in numerous meetings about all aspects of life at university to make sure that your voices are heard. So please do get in touch with us in case you have any issues that you want to raise. We always have places where we can take them. And thank you all for coming on today. I believe I'm now handing back over to Charlie or to Ben.
Hello, it's back to me. Thank you ever so much, Jane, and all of you for those opening remarks. So some of you have been sending in questions using that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you ever so much. And please do keep doing that. You can like your Q&A buttons, other people's questions, and that will let us know that it's a question that you particularly would like to be asked and answered. We are going to try out a series of short polls as we go through today. And I think we're about to make some magic happen so that we can run the first of these polls. So I believe it's going to appear on your screen, and it'll be a quick set of one question, and you've got some multiple choices to answer. And we really would appreciate you engaging in that as best as you can, please. I'm going to pause for about 15 seconds whilst you get to look through that and engage in it before we start to take the first of your questions. Excellent. So I can see more questions coming in, and I can see that some of you are participating in that question. So the first question we've received is a really good question. A few of us mentioned in those opening remarks this move to Tier 2. Charlie, can you talk us through exactly what Tier 2 means, please?
Thank you very much, Ben. First thing is we have to distinguish between different tier systems. I mean, the government has now established a 3-level system of medium, high and very high. And that's a classification of local areas. And York falls into the high category, which is the middle category of those 3, which means that York as a city is now subject to restrictions additional to those that apply at the national level. So the national level is rule of 6, pubs shutting at 10 o'clock and all of that. In addition, we are now subject to rules about household mixing. That's the big change. So no household mixing should be happening indoors. The rule of 6 continues to apply outdoors with households allowed to mix, but it's the household mixing thing which is the core of the new rules. Alongside that, and separate from that, and apologies, it's confusing, but don't blame me, blame the government. We have 4 tiers which describe how universities work under the conditions of the pandemic. Tier 1 is broadly what I described earlier as our blended provision of activity on campus, teaching, social activity, and so on. Tier 4 at the end of that scale is lockdown, whether decided at national level or at local level. And effectively, that would mean the end of most activities on campus, with the possible exception of some aspects of healthcare teaching to make sure that doctors and nurses can go on and get qualified next summer. Tiers 2 and 3 are the middle areas. Tier 2 would involve an element of face-to-face teaching for all students, but limited to those things which the departments concerned think are pedagogically the most essential. And Tier 3 would be a restriction of in-person teaching to lab-based and other practical courses like music or courses in TFDI, as well as courses using science labs. So we have 2 different tiering systems. There's the one that the Department for Education uses for universities, and there's the other one, which is about the classification of local areas. Local areas were in the middle one. In the Department for Education's classification, we are in the lowest one.
Thank you ever so much, Charlie. That's we recognise it's really difficult to convey, and your help trying to understand it is appreciated. we are lucky enough today to have a wide range of kind of specialists with us in the room, and I'm going to try and bring them in at various points as we go through some of your questions. The next question that we've been asked to consider, so it reads, what help can we give to postgraduates who don't get tuition fees paid for by Student Funding England? Many postgrads rely on employment to support them through their study, but many have lost their employment and some in the near future will do so. How can you support postgrads to stay in York, as I think we'd all want them to? Now, we're lucky enough to have a representative here who specialises in postgraduates. So I am going to go to you first, Jane, and then I'm going to ask Paula to come in from the university as well, if that's all right. Jane, can you go first?
Yes, thank you, Ben. This is an issue that we're very aware of, and the fact that our postgrads are struggling a lot with money and financial issues at the moment. So I don't have a definitive answer for you on this, but I can say that Clara, our Vice President Wellbeing and Community, is working really hard to make sure that you can all get access to the hardship funds that the university provides as well. We're also potentially looking at creating a postgraduate specific one of those, but there is financial support out there, so please do seek it out. We're very aware of how difficult it is to be a postgrad, and the financial challenges that you're all facing, because you don't get that support from the government. So please do get in touch with us if you're facing some particular financial difficulties at the moment, and we can help point you in the right places where to get access to that. And I think I'm going to finish there and let Paula jump in with any more information that she might have.
Thanks, Jane. Yes, I think the obviously the Student Support Fund is available, and the colleagues in the Student Hub can support students who need help to actually access that fund, and it's there for emergencies and for exactly these scenarios when students have got this sort of financial hardship. It's you know, please do contact the Student Hub and they will help you. They've got trained financial advisors. In fact, we've got a dedicated financial advisor who started working in there, who will actually be able to support students with that application. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks ever so much, Paula. The next question we were going to look at, so there's been a question about what is the likelihood of all our learning being online, and you know, and I guess if we could predict the future, I'm sure we'd have already told you that to some extent. But I guess I'd quite like to bring in Tracy Lightfoot. Are you available?
I am. Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone. So I think, as Charlie's already outlined, there are these two different tiers here. We have the ones that the government have set in terms of the levels, and we've heard about that for tier 2. Now, in terms of our teaching, we've worked really hard since COVID started to try and maximise the amount of face-to-face activity we've had. And as Charlie's explained, this will move as we go through the tiers. So at the moment, we have lectures all online, but we have seminar groups, we have small group teaching, we have our laboratories, our practical work that is all delivered in that face-to-face. And as we would, if we move through these tiers, we will maintain some level of face-to-face activity. We're working very hard with departments to understand what that might be. And obviously we've got a commitment here as well. As more students are self-isolating, that means we're having to put more provision online in very different ways to ensure that all students, irrespective of whether they're on campus, whether they're overseas or self-isolating anywhere in the world, can access that education. So we appreciate that there might be different levels of online teaching as well, or face-to-face teaching, but we've done that to maximise the availability of staff and the resources that we have available to make sure it's in a COVID-safe environment.
Thanks ever so much, Tracy. That's really useful. The next question that I wanted to cover off, and this is one that we've seen quite a lot of in and around some of the media, and I've seen some people praising what's available and some people questioning what's available. And the question is, why are the meal packages for isolating students so expensive? The cost is prohibitive, and as a uni which prides itself on its students' welfare, York is failing its students in this aspect. Is there a volunteer to take that? Because if not, I'm going to pick on somebody. Charlie, you've kindly volunteered. Thank you ever so much.
Well, somebody else may be able to come in and support what I'm going to say, perhaps Alistair. But the packages that we have established are delivered at cost price. They're not delivered with any surplus making intention at all. They are cost price packages. And also for those who wish to avail themselves of them, we have established arrangements, especially for off-campus students, with Morrison's, with a hotline for students in self-isolation for online ordering and delivery. And that's quite exceptional. It is extremely difficult to get an online shopping delivery date within the next 3 weeks. So we've managed to establish that for students off campus. And we've established something similar available to students on campus through our NISA supermarkets, not as extensive as Morrison's, but with, I think, the top 300 items in Morrison's available for online ordering and delivery. So we do provide the packages at cost price, and we have put other arrangements in place for students who don't want to use those packages. And I hope that choice is one which can address your concerns if you don't think that the price of the university packages is good value.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And I should say, I know that there have been people volunteering from right across the institution to try and help with the delivery of those, to try and make sure we get the food that is available to the people who need it as quickly as possible. So there is a number of different perspectives on the extent to which we're managing to nail that down, I think. The next question I had is, it's got a number of elements to it, but so that the question reads, how do you feel about students returning home due to fears of being stuck on campus if we go into another lockdown? It goes on to ask, are you willing to refund accommodation, or will that only happen in a full lockdown? Now, so for me, there's two parts to that. One is about how we feel about trying to create a place where our students feel safe and secure and want to stay here. So if I take that element before we look at the accommodation and any available refunds, is there someone willing to answer whether we want our students to stay in York? Charlie, you're offering again.
But I'm sure that various will come in, and I'm sure others will have different perspectives. And Tracy is thinking about this very, very carefully, of course. We do want to offer what we can in terms of an in-person experience at the university, through teaching, through social facilities, through all the other aspects which support both academic and personal development at university. We can't offer all that we normally would because we are in the middle of a pandemic. We do want to maintain all that we can as the situation evolves around us. So that's our starting point. Tracy may have something a little further to say, in particular about the value of face-to-face teaching.
Thanks, Charlie, for that. I think 2 points in this. I think just thinking about the online first, I think we should be really clear that an online experience can provide great educational learning and assessment as well. And I think we've got a great history of this in York as well. It's something that we've done for over 20 years, or perhaps on a smaller scale, but it's something that we take very seriously. So I think in terms of the online experience that you're getting, we know it's of high quality and it's there to provide you with that education you need. I think the value of face-to-face teaching is not always just about the pedagogy itself, but often it's coming together in a small room with students. It's about sharing experiences, it's about learning communication skills and being interact with colleagues and negotiate with them as well. So whilst the face-to-face activities we've got at the moment might not be of those that you expected, we are looking at different ways all the time and continually reviewing how we might provide that face-to-face experience. It might not be as embedded within the pedagogy as you thought you might have, but nevertheless, we're looking at ways of that. It might be getting students in a room, for example, just to talk about something in the news, to share experiences, to talk about specific journals and articles as well. So please bear with us as we look at these and as situations evolve. We'll be looking at new and innovative ways that we can have that face-to-face experience as we move through not only this term but also into the next academic year as well.
Thanks very much. And, you know, I should say from my perspective, it's a real shift for students and for the university. York has prided itself for years on providing a dynamic face-to-face small group teaching and having a fairly modest online provision, and we're having to learn to engage with learning in different ways, and that's quite a journey for everyone. So the second part of that question was more about accommodation and what happens if and where a student perhaps has to leave campus unexpectedly or perhaps wants to. I would like to hand over to Alistair, who's responsible for trying to support the effective running of our accommodation. Alistair, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'll answer this one. And in terms of accommodation and cancellations and refunds, I'd like to echo the message really and just stress that the campus and our accommodation does remain open for our students. We're very conscious that moving to uni is moving into your new home, and I think that the terms, as a general rule, the terms of the residence agreement apply. And to give an example of our policy in the last lockdown, in the full national lockdown, we did allow students to be released from their contracts. We don't expect that to be the case with a full national lockdown. Obviously, there is a change today in the tier that we find ourselves in, and we will show a level of flexibility. But in terms of a blanket release, we can't necessarily say that at this point. What I would advise is if anyone's got any specific questions or concerns or anything they would like to ask, any circumstances, do get in touch with us either on the phone or drop us an email in accommodation, and we'll be delighted to help.
Thanks very much, Alistair. They're coming thick and fast now, so I'm going to press on some really challenging ones. There's a question here about what is YUSU's stance on students paying full fees for this academic year. I'm going to go to Patrick first, then I'm going to go to Jane, and then I'm going to go to Charlie as well, please. So Patrick.
Thanks, Ben. So look, YUSU's position for, before I was even a student was that, along with, I think, virtually all student unions in the country, is that we do not want tuition fees. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, governments of all colours have obviously put us in a position where students now have to pay an incredible amount of money for teaching. My personal view is, that is completely wrong, frankly. And it's such a shame that we're in a position where we have, the marketisation of higher education. We're in a position where it costs money to go to university. We're in a position where people can't afford the rent. They can't, they have to work jobs on top of their degrees to afford the basics. I mean, I appreciate that's not the University of York's fault. That's a structural issue in our society, which is completely wrong. So in terms of what YUSU's doing is we are working with the NUS, the National Union of Students, to campaign, as has been going for a number of years now, to campaign to the government, because it essentially does lie with the government whether or not that universities charge tuition fees. I'm sure Charlie and Minette could advise on York's position on that, but I mean, my personal view and certainly what YUSU are fighting for is no tuition fees. But I suppose, in terms of more practical and short-term things, because I'm afraid that is a long-term battle, as I think all students recognise that's a long-term battle to have. In the short term, and certainly what we can do here in York is to look at, things like value for money in terms of accommodation, in terms of food, as we've spoken about. Where possible, YUSU does work with the university to try and cut costs wherever we can. And there are little things in terms of resources, in terms of accessing books online, where we have, as student unions, worked over the last few years to cut costs for students. But on the broader issue of tuition fees, mine and the view of student unions across the country is that we shouldn't have tuition fees. But as I say, that is a national debate to be had, but certainly we're contributing to that debate, and we will push for no tuition fees in every platform we get.
And around to Jane, please.
Yes, thank you, Ben. I just really want to echo what Patrick said, actually, particularly about the abolition of tuition fees, if I can say the word correctly. I'm aware that for postgraduates, this is a very different picture because tuition fees are set by the university and are decided with a maximum cap on it. And that goes for PGT and PGR students as well. But again, our view on that is very much that they should be abolished. And that, even though is not necessarily a national decision, is something that we are trying to work towards. But I think Patrick covered everything brilliantly, and I don't have much more to add, but thank you, Ben.
And around to Charlie, please.
Thanks very much. I think students might be surprised by how many members of the university leadership would agree with sentiments about charging fees for university education. However, we are in a situation where fees are charged, and that is what supports universities to run. This is a question focused, obviously, very directly on teaching, but I would make the point that fees do not simply pay for the face-to-face encounters with academics at this university. They fund the whole of the operation of the university and all of those other facilities which are available for students. It's not something which is just calibrated on face-to-face encounters. And those face-to-face encounters are now replaced in part by online encounters, but it's the same academic experts, it's the same brilliant academics, many of whom are among the best in the world in their fields. And those fees ultimately pay their salaries. And if I didn't have the fees, I couldn't pay the salaries. And I don't think that's a position we would want to be in. Whether or not we think paying fees is the right way to fund higher education, it is the way that it exists now, and it's the way that I have to manage the university. It's the context I have to manage the university within.
Thanks, Charlie. Charlie, I'm going to stick with you. There's a question about recommendations from SAGE. So it says that SAGE recommended that universities stop face-to-face teaching, and we are part of York's cases. Shouldn't we be moving to online-only teaching? Can you take that one for us, please, Charlie?
Thanks very much, Ben. It is an important question, and those SAGE minutes have been widely publicised. I think they were talking about a situation of circuit breaker lockdown, not necessarily the situation we're in, but they do raise some interesting questions. The way I look at it is we now have significant evidence from what we have seen over the last weeks at this university in the development of COVID cases. I'm going to ask my colleague Ian Wiggins to come in a moment to explain this more fully. But with the, I think we have 300 and something current cases. We've had another 100 or so who have now gone through self-isolation and have returned to activity. So a data set of about 400. And in that 400, we have had no evidence of any classroom-based transmission, no evidence of any classroom-based transmission. And I speak with Vice-Chancellors elsewhere around the country, and that's a general theme. There is no evidence of classroom-based transmission in any university in the UK that I have heard of. And I think that's the issue that we are discussing on a very regular basis with the City Council's public health team. We have a very strong collaboration there. That's the context in which we get qualified advice about what we should do. We discuss every single COVID case with that City Council team, and we review things in the round. And their advice is there is no rationale for moving away from the current situation of face-to-face teaching because there is no evidence that face-to-face teaching is a locus of transmission. But my colleague Ian Wiggins is deep in that and might be able to say a little bit more.
Yeah, happy to add some more details. So I've been running the test and trace operation. So we've got a team that are looking at that. I'm sure some of the people on this call may have spoken to them if they've tested positive. And what we're doing there is getting in touch to talk through the activities that people have been through, where they've been in that key infectious period. And the public health advice that we're looking at is the 48 hours before someone experienced symptoms, or if they never had symptoms but tested positive, the 48 hours before that positive test. For a large number of cases, people haven't been involved in kind of campus activities. They haven't been in kind of face-to-face sessions. Maybe it's been over a weekend or something like that. Where there have been in a face-to-face teaching environment, we're looking in each case at the mitigations that were in place. We're looking at the risk assessments. We're looking at the social distancing measures, whether masks were worn. And in a few of those cases where we think that maybe the control measures we put in place, we've then checked even more. And in some small cases, we've asked extra people to self-isolate as a result. But as we're going through that data and we're looking at where we're seeing infections come up, there's nothing in that data that's pointing towards face-to-face teaching as the source of infection. Now, kind of, I think really important to be clear, we'll never know for sure where someone gets a COVID infection from. If any of us get COVID, we'll never be able to pin it down to that exact moment. It was that person in the shop queue. It was that kind of moment where I was on the bus. But what we can see is where we look at clusters of cases, and we can look at possible links. And in the vast majority of cases where we can draw links between them, the link is within households, or households that we know have interacted with each other, and that's where you can trace the infection back to. And as Charlie mentioned, we're building up a pretty robust data set of the contacts that people have had, the environments that they've been in, and cross-checking that against where we're seeing other infections. And there's nothing that is showing in any of our data or with the other universities that we speak to that those face-to-face teaching sessions are causing infections, and that those infections are happening through, in the vast majority of cases, household-to-household contacts, which is what we see in non-university environments as well. In the vast majority of cases up and down the country, quite outside of universities and students, cases happen through household-to-household contacts.
Thanks, Ian. You're our very own Chris Whitty. Thank you ever so much. This seems like a perfect moment to pause, if we can make the technology work, and ask a second poll that we had, which is actually about what you want, about how you feel about learning and teaching right now, and whether you would like to be taught online right now, or a mixture, or face-to-face. I hope the magic is happening and you'll be able to participate in that poll accordingly. We're really keen to hear more about how you feel. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to move to a question that's directed at Maddi. The question is about sports, and given the shift to Tier 2, the question is, this weekend, should we be cancelling sports training or continuing to train and plan events and activities around sport as normal? Can I go to you, please, Maddi?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. It's definitely something that's been filling my inbox up this afternoon since we made the announcement. Outdoor sports, any organised outdoor sport, that means any of our UC or college sport clubs, they can continue as normal this weekend. I am waiting clarification on indoor sports and as to what is going to happen to them. I'm afraid I can't be more specific, and I will get you an update before close of play tomorrow evening. So that means before 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you will have an answer. Unfortunately, this is another one of these situations where the DCMS has dropped something on NGBs and on the higher education sports sector and the sports sector beyond that with no prior warning. We've had no opportunity to pre-plan for this. Guidance is there for potential situations like this, but it isn't there to specifically cater to the new restrictions and the tiering system that the government has put in place. So we're working as quickly as we can. As soon as I have that information, it will be with you. It may be that tomorrow it's a holding response, but we will tell you what to do this weekend if you're an indoor sport by 5 p.m. tomorrow. I will say I'm extremely unhappy with the lack of preparation and notice given by the government and DCMS in particular. And this is echoed across higher education sport. They've dropped things on us time and time again. It's made it very difficult. and all the club and uni college committees are coping with admirably. This is something I'm looking to go to government in my capacity as Bucks student director about, because it is absolutely decimating student sport, and it's so important for both physical and mental well-being of students that is able to operate and is in place, quite frankly. So yes, the main message is outdoors fine, indoor you will know by 5 p.m. tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Maddi. I don't think there is anybody more committed to trying to help students safely play sport here on campus than you, so absolutely noted. Next question, if someone from my physical seminar tests positive, would I definitely be made aware? I'd like to pass to Paula, please.
Probably Ian, I guess, Ben.
Oh, Ian, are you willing to take that one?
Yeah, let me jump in, and then and Paul and I work really closely on the contact tracing side, so we can both kind of chip in. So the short and honest answer here is not necessarily, and the reason why that's the case is because someone's COVID status, when they tell us that they've tested positive, and thank you to everyone that does tell us, because it helps us build up that picture, it helps us understand what's going on, it helps us support you in isolation. That is sensitive medical data. Now we have under public health reasons, we've got an imperative to share that where there's a public health reason to do so. We won't do it in an identifiable way, but where with our colleagues at Public Health at the City Council, we judge that there's a need to tell a wider group to self-isolate, then absolutely that group will be told there is a need for you to self-isolate because we think you might have been in contact with someone who's COVID positive. But where our public health experts, and I should stress, it's the public health experts at the council that we are working with on an hourly basis to make these decisions, and it's them that are making the call on who needs to self-isolate. They're looking at our risk assessments, they're looking at the measures that were in place. And if we don't judge that there was a public health risk there, then we're not going to share that COVID status about someone's medical information, because that is their personal information, and we've got a duty to protect that and keep that confidential, unless the overriding need is the public health to share that. I'm not sure whether, Paula, you want to jump in on that.
You've covered it all, Ian, perfectly. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much. We've heard a fair bit about how students are perhaps, how they might feel and how they might react to face-to-face teaching. I'm quite interested about the perspective from the academics and the staff who are in that classroom. Jill Webber, are you available to give us any thoughts from that academics perspective about the classroom?
Yes, absolutely. I teach face-to-face, I taught last week, and I just want to thank you really, because I've found students on campus to be very, very respectful and compliant. And it's very clear to me that in face-to-face sessions, you're looking after each other and you're looking after staff. And that's the overwhelming feedback I've had from staff with whom I have a lot of contact and who are teaching face-to-face. They are enjoying it, and so are their students. So thank you.
We've got a question about Christmas break and about students, the extent to which they'll be able to go home, and in particular that there's a kind of spin-off question about international students, some of whom might be travelling to countries who are in a different situation than here in the UK. Wayne, would you be able to take that one?
Wayne may be muted.
I'll take it, and I think that Charlie may probably want to add to what I'm going to say. My view is that if students want to stay on campus, then of course you're welcome to do so, and we'll be here to support you if you stay on campus. We'll be keeping essential services open, and we'll have support available to you. If you decide that you want to leave, then it depends obviously when that lockdown comes, if you have to stay here for 2 weeks. But our term finishes fairly early in December, and of course our view is that if you want to stay here, but obviously everything's dependent on what the government guidelines say at the time, and we have to be true to that. But whether you're here or if you're traveling, then we'll do our best support. I know that Charlie, you probably have more to add to that, and I know that you have a particular view that perhaps you want to share on that as well.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Ben. I think there's two things here. Some students will not be able to go home. In particular, many of our international students who may not have that opportunity. And for anybody who really does need to stay on campus, we will make sure that the facilities to support them remain available, and that's a clear guarantee. We do that every year. We normally have about 1,000 students who stay through Christmas on campus. It may well be more this year, but we will, as usual, make sure they are supported. And I think Jane wants to come in on that point in a minute. But let me say something about the wider issue. There's been lots of speculation, including some newspaper headlines this morning about how we will all manage the big movement of students from campus settings back to their homes, in particular in the UK at Christmas, because movement of people around the country in a pandemic is a challenge that has to be managed. I've made very clear in conversations with the Department for Education that there's going to be all sorts of people traveling around at Christmas, and it's not just students. Other people will, and to some extent they'll do it irrespective, I guess, of whatever restrictions are in place, because the family concerns will override that, and people will be happy to engage in that risk. And I don't think students should be treated any differently from anyone else. So I am absolutely committed to work to make sure that students can get home and be with their families at Christmas. The UK government, working for England in this circumstance, is trying to think of ways of managing that, including what I think is an illogical idea, which is to ask students to self-isolate for the 2 weeks before Christmas. That's illogical in a number of ways. Firstly, as I've made clear, we don't have evidence of transmission in classroom settings. So moving people into an online-only mode for 2 weeks doesn't have a lot of epidemiological sense. But, you know, we're currently supporting 2,500 students in self-isolation. It's a big challenge. It's a logistical challenge. We've got lots and lots of our regular staff doing their regular jobs at high intensity. We've got 250 volunteers in addition to that, helping to support students in self-isolation. And we've got a lot of student employees who are helping us with all of those activities. It would be impossible logistically to manage that for our full community of 18,000 or so students. So we're making very, very clear representations to government that some of the things that they've been proposing, which were covered again in papers this morning, are unfeasible. And the most important thing that they could do is to ensure that there is an adequate COVID testing capability, which could manage the risk through testing in an appropriate way. And we'll continue to make those points to government. Sorry for going on so long, but I get quite exercised about this one. And Jane wanted, I think, to say a little bit more.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. And I think we all feel that we would want students to go home if possible at Christmas. But we are aware that every year there are students that choose to stay on campus out of a multitude of different reasons. And every year the GSA does work with colleges and with YUSU as well to make sure that we have events provision across the holiday period, and we are already planning that for this year because we're aware that you will need that extra support. So there will be events going on and things like that as well. So all of the support will be there for you if you do have to stay on campus over the Christmas break, but we do hope that you're able to get home and see friends and family. I know I would love to see my parents personally.
Thank you. We are moving swiftly towards the conclusion here, but I've got a question that's come through loud and clear, I think, from a number of people. And it's a question about whether the university was was responsible, I guess, in encouraging students to come back to the campus for the start of the new academic year. There's stuff in there about asking students and staff back and GTAs who teach. I'm going to hand over to Tracy first, please. Tracy, can you give us a quick overview of whether you think that was responsible and the basis on which we invited that to occur?
So I think at all stages of since the pandemic started, we have acted within government guidelines, public health guidance, both at local and national levels. So I think from that responsibility point of view, everything we have done has had the students and the staff health and well-being at the forefront of everything we've done, ranging from how we've set our classrooms up to the support we're now seeing for self-isolating students. We've also got a commitment to delivering education to our students as well. That's what we're for. And if you look very much at the strategy and the vision statement that we said, that's what we're here for. We're here to provide an education. So I think we were responsible for having students back. We've got a commitment to do that. And we've at all times done this in a safe manner. We operate a campus that is COVID secure. So yes, I think we want you to be here, we want to learn with you. And that's why we've been very careful about how we've done our classrooms and how we're organising our teaching. In particular, by having lectures online, that was one way of avoiding large groups of students together. But by having that face-to-face in that small group teaching, which prides itself on. I think we're aware that we want to talk to our GTAs as well. We want to understand the challenges that they face, and that's certainly a priority of mine, along with the GSA over the next couple of days, to understand how we make sure that that group in particular is supported, both with respect to enabling them to continue their research, but also importantly, provide a fantastic opportunity to teach our students. It's really great we have so many of our PGR students wanting to get engaged with that teaching, because learning from them that are so close and passionate about their subjects, for me, is one of the real advantages of our education in York as well. And I'm sure Charlie and others might want to pick up on this as well, about that responsibility.
In the interest of time, Tracy, I'm not going to allow Charlie a slot on this one, because I wanted to ask an important question of Wayne that I don't think has been touched on yet, and that is what support is available for students who are perhaps in relationships, they might feel lonely, you know, in the current environment. How do we support people who feel isolated and lonely?
That's a very good question, Ben. Thank you for asking it. And I think it's a very pertinent question for all of our students. We have a range of services available to support you. When you go into self-isolation, then we have a student hub. You're asked to complete a self-isolation form. And that self-isolation form is the trigger to initiate support for you. So what I would say to all of you is that if you have to go into self-isolation, please complete that form. That form is the start of the process that initiates support. And when you're in self-isolation, then you'll be contacted initially by our student hub team. They're there for the majority of the day, and we're looking to extend those services, and we have extended those services there as well. And you'll be contacted on a regular basis by your college team, by your college office, to maintain that contact with you. And my view of this actually is it's important that when you're in self-isolation that we actually create as many connections as we possibly can for you. So peer-to-peer support by your own fellow students, I think, is very important, and also by our STICs and our STIMs as well, operating through our colleges. I think that's important in terms of creating those connections for you. And also we have available for you a range of online services. If you haven't already got connected, and get connected to Together All, which was formerly known as Big White Wall. It's an online services mental health platform. It's there to support well-being, and it's a community of people that are in the same boat, and it's also a platform that's monitored as well by professionals, by qualified professionals. And indeed, if you're having well-being difficulties, we've also got our open door team that are there, and they indeed are maintaining contact with particularly the most vulnerable students on a regular basis. And in addition to that, your academic department should be making contact with you as well. And I hope that you're making making use of your academic supervisors that are there virtually to help you, and supporting them as well. We have student well-being officers. But what I would say is that if you feel lonely or you feel that you need help, then please contact our Student Hub team. Please let your colleges know, and we will arrange to ensure that that we maintain contact with you. But I would encourage you also to maintain contact with others. I think peer-to-peer support is so important. And also, as we mentioned earlier, when you're in self-isolation as well, the student unions are there to support you with a number of social activities and events. And we're also exploring other ways of actually keeping you entertained. So hold this space.
We've got a final poll that we're going to put out to you now, and it kind of echoes back to the early poll, really. So whilst that comes live on your screens, and hopefully you'll complete that for us, I suppose I wanted to say that we've had well over 120 questions. We are really, really grateful for you being here, for you sharing some time with us and being open and honest, and helping us to have an honest conversation about COVID. And those questions that we haven't been able to answer this evening, they will be used to try and steer our next set of communications to you, so that we can try and keep the conversation going, because there is still more to come in the coming weeks and months, and we really do want to navigate that with you.